Welcome back, and in this episode we're going to blow stuff up. Helicopters to be precise. And what we're going to do is we're going to create shrapnel explosions from the helicopters. It's one of the cool features in the original Sabotage game. So what I want you to do is go to the images folder, find the shrapnel image, drag it onto the scene to create a sprite. So the sprite is a white color, and this will allow us to use the renderer to colorize it. So under sprite render, select the color field, and let's pick some kind of bright yellow-red color. So we need to get the shrapnel to do shrapnel things. So let's add a shrapnel controller. Okay, here's the shrapnel controller. So the shrapnel controller needs to keep track of a couple of things. The speed is how far it's traveling across the screen. The spin is how fast it's rotating. And the gravity amount is how fast it's going to fall to the floor. So we have a fall speed, which we will be adjusting by the gravity amount. The lifetime is how long the shrapnel will be alive. And current lifetime is the timer we're going to use to tell when to destroy the shrapnel. So when the shrapnel is created, we're going to pick a random spin between 2 and 5 rotations a second. That's 360 degrees per rotation. Then we'll set the current lifetime timer to the lifetime we have in our settings. To animate our shrapnel, we'll take our current position and we'll adjust the X by the speed and the Y times the fall speed. And then we'll set the position back to the new position. Here's where we rotate the sprite by the spin. The next section will check to see if the lifetime timer has expired. If it has, then it will destroy the shrapnel. If it hasn't, it's going to fade the color out over time. It gets the color from the sprite renderer, and then depending on how much time it has left, it sets the alpha value. When the alpha is equal to 1, it's completely visible. And when the alpha is 0, it's completely transparent. Once we set the alpha, we'll put the color back into the sprite render. So this function is called by the helicopter to set the shrapnel to the helicopter's location. It passes in the speed and the initial position. Now we need to get the helicopter controller to create the shrapnel. This is the helicopter controller, and we've added the game object shrapnel object. In the updates section, we've added a call to shrapnel spawn inside the check collision. So when the helicopter gets hit by a bullet, it will spawn shrapnel. The shrapnel spawn routine will create new shrapnel 3 times, and it will pass in the current speed and the current position. Let's go back to Unity. We need to turn the shrapnel into a prefab, so drag the shrapnel object into the asset panel. Let's set the gravity amount to 3 and the lifetime to 2. Let's remove the shrapnel object from the scene. In the helicopter prefab, let's set the shrapnel object to be the shrapnel. Okay, let's give this a try. So we can see that when we hit the helicopter, it creates shrapnel, but it looks like it's just creating 1. In actuality, it is creating 3. They just have the exact same fall and speed. So we need to introduce a little bit of randomness into our shrapnel creation routine. So back to the helicopter controller. To add a little bit of randomness into our shrapnel, first we're going to make a new position value and copy our current position. The first piece of shrapnel, we will set the speed to a random amount between 80% and 100% of the speed, and we'll use the current position. For our second piece of shrapnel, we're going to subtract 0.2 from our X position, and again use a random speed. For the third shrapnel, we'll move the X position up by 0.2, and again use a random range of 80% to 100% of our speed. Let's make an adjustment to our shrapnel controller. We've added a little randomness to our shrapnel controller so that when it creates shrapnel, it will set the fall speed to be -1 to 0. This will actually have the shrapnel go up a little bit before it starts to fall. With these changes, let's see how the shrapnel looks now. There, that's a lot more randomness. We can see that there's 3 shrapnel now. We need the shrapnel to act like bullets. That's a pretty easy thing to do. Go to the shrapnel prefab and change the tag to bullet. It'll now be part of the bullet collision routines. Let's give it a try. There. Now the shrapnel acts like bullets. Now it's time to add the paratroopers. Let's go to our images folder and find the trooper image and drag it onto the scene to create a sprite. And we're going to have to create a controller for him. We're going to call it trooper controller. And let's edit that script. So the trooper needs to keep track of gravity and how fast he's falling and where the ground's at. We have a Boolean flag for when he's on the ground or not. So the first thing we need to set is the flag to say he's not on the ground, he's actually traveling through the air. To animate our paratrooper, first we check to see if he's on the ground or not. If he's in the air, then we'll get the current position and we'll update his Y position by how fast he's falling. Then we'll add gravity to his fall speed. Then we'll see if he has landed on the ground or not. If he has, then we'll set the Y position to the ground position. Now we do this because we don't know how long it is between updates. So in case the update took a little too long and he actually traveled through the ground, we don't want him to spike himself deep into the ground. So we set the ground position as his last position. We'll set the on ground flag to true. Finally, we'll update his position. Let's switch to Unity and see how that works. Well, he's just floating in air, probably because we haven't set the gravity. So select the trooper and go to his controller. Let's set the gravity to 3. And the ground position, we'll set the -4.7. And there he goes. He landed a little deep. So let's change the ground to 4.6. That's a little better. Now that our troopers fly through the air and kamikaze to the ground, let's get them to jump out of the helicopters. So let's go to the helicopter controller. The helicopter needs to keep track of the trooper object and whether it has a payload or not, and when to dump the payload. So in the setup routine, we're going to set our payload flag to true, meaning we have a trooper on board. And we're going to pick a payload position between -8 and +8 for it to dump the payload. Now if you notice, I have F's at the end of the values, and that's because I wanted to return a float instead of integers. So in our update routine, we added a check to see if we have the payload. If we do, we check to see if we've passed the payload dump position. While we're traveling forward, we check to see if we have passed the payload position in a positive direction. When we're traveling backwards, we check to see if we've gone past the payload in a negative direction. If either of these are true, then we'll dump the trooper. We do that by instantiating the trooper object. And we're keeping a pointer to the trooper object so then we can update his position to the helicopter's current position. And then we set the payload flag to false. Okay, back to Unity. So we need our trooper to be a prefab so that the helicopter can launch it. So we'll select the Assets tab and drag the trooper into the Assets, which creates a prefab. Let's get rid of the trooper object in the scene. Select the helicopter prefab and set the trooper object to the trooper prefab. And let's give this code a try. So normally when people jump out of helicopters and they land directly on the ground, they don't do too well. So these are supposed to be paratroopers. They're supposed to have parachutes open up to slow their descent. So we're going to have to add chutes. To do this, go to the Images folder and select the parachute. Now let's switch the parachute into a prefab. So select the Assets tab and drag the parachute onto it. And then let's delete the parachute from the scene. So we need to teach the paratrooper how to use a parachute. Let's go to the trooper controller. So we need to tell the paratrooper how to use a parachute. To do that, we're going to give the trooper a pointer to a chute object so he can create his own chute. And then we're going to keep track of that chute that it gets created. Then we'll have a flag to tell us whether we used the chute or not. In the start function, we will set the use flag to false, so we'll have one parachute available. In our update function, we're going to see if we're traveling too fast, and if we are, then we're going to spawn the chute and slow down our rate of descent and mark that we've used the flag. The other change we did is we look to see if we currently have a chute. If we don't, then we're going to add gravity. Otherwise, our descent will be constant. The spawn chute routine will instantiate a new parachute and store it in our current chute object. We will set the chute to be the same position as the trooper. However, we're going to make the chute a child of the paratrooper. This is an easy way to have the chute be removed when the paratrooper gets removed. Back in Unity, let's select the paratrooper object and we'll give him a parachute, and let's give it a try. Look at that. Nice safe landings. Now, when he's on the ground, we need to get him to put his parachute away. To fix this, we will add something to the update. When the trooper lands on the ground and he has a chute, we will put the chute away by destroying it. Let's go back to Unity and give it a try. Very nice. I'm happy with that. So we've done a lot this episode, but the next step is to get the paratroopers to collide with bullets. And we'll do that in the next episode. Until then, stay nerdy, my friends.